The Summer Showdown is officially in the history books, and I can say with absolute confidence that it certainly left a mark. Aside from a pretty crazy meta, we saw a lot of variety when it came to the results. A lot of the time, the outcome was very much in question. There's so many takeaways as we head into the final month of play, so let's take a breather to talk about it all. Here is one thing that I learned about every Overwatch League franchise from the Summer Showdown. Let's begin with the West. The Paris Eternal. You are broken. It's pretty obvious, but that's my only way to summarize it. This entire season for them has been a complete train wreck, and to be completely honest, we've hit a low point. To deconstruct your entire roster and everything that made you a fun team to watch last year is insane. They're essentially what Vancouver were in 2020. A hopeless team trying to play catch-up. The new roster has some talented pieces, but they lack the experience. They're not supposed to be winning a lot of games. I understand that Paris did make these moves with the intention of improving, but with how late this all came, they're literally being set up to fail. I feel terrible for them. The expectations for this final stage are painfully low. Good luck, boys. The Boston Uprising. Maybe coaching was the problem after all. Okay. Obviously, it is way too early to say such a thing for certain, but based on what we saw, Coach Laurie was being pretty stubborn. He tried to replace Punk at every corner despite the team's success with him in the lineup. The newest example of this would be trading for Mag. Mag himself is a pretty solid player who could help this franchise out big time in the future. But it's painfully clear that right now here in the present, Boston are at their best when they utilize Punk. They only won 2 games this stage, and you know who is starting both of them? Punk. Management had no choice but to make a move in this scenario. They had to choose between their coach and Punk, and clearly they chose the latter of the two. And look what happened the moment they did. The moment that Punk comes back into the lineup, they start winning again. It's almost like he's the key. Their final month is going to be very interesting, as there still is a chance for them to make the play-ins. Let's see how it goes. The NYXL. It's far too late for you. I keep saying it over and over again, but the New York Excelsior wasted serious potential this year. They had a decent chance to get back into the race this stage thanks to a new meta and their support changes. But what we got instead was a whole bunch of absolutely nothing. They genuinely look so defeated when they play. Yaki puts the team on his back constantly with no help to be found. The synergy is very weak. They get one lucky win versus Houston, but in return, they let Paris somehow take a map away from them. There's nothing left to say about this franchise this year. Their season is absolutely over. Another year of Yaki's career is going straight down the drain. What a shame. The Atlanta Reign. Realizing your full potential will take some time. Honestly, I can't knock the Reign too much for their below standard stage. On one hand, this brawly meta certainly fits the identity of last year's roster, but the thing is, it's a different team this year. There's different faces, which means that a different style likely works better. And I mean, in general, they're still in the process of figuring a few things out. Speedily's finally 18, and then the recent acquisition of Vigilante means that they have a lot of adjusting to do. Once everybody is more so on the same page, you're going to see these guys rise up to the occasion most likely. Their potential is still insanely high. If the Junker Queen meta dies for good next stage, they're going to be just fine. Although at the same time, they're definitely not in the clear. Plans look pretty good for them, but a lot of teams are right on their tail to push them into a low seed for that tournament. Their road to the playoffs is not going to be easy if they continue to struggle this way. It's now or never. The LA Gladiators. Everybody has their weaknesses. The seemingly invincible Giga Chad tournament gods finally showed some cracks. After all their success, they ended up struggling for once. Between Patty Pan and Shu's absence, incorporating Happy into the lineup, and even Reiner struggles on the Junker Queen, the Glads had all they can handle. Opponents they'd beat in their sleep usually were taking them out with relative ease at times, and they were failing to clutch up in those big games. We know the Glads are a high potential threat, but what happens when things don't end up going their way? Do they have the mental fortitude to get back on track? For their sake, I hope that they figure it out. I'm praying it's just growing pains like the Atlanta Reign. The Glads are going to make the playoffs for sure, that'll be fine, but their recent failure has all but destroyed their hopes of getting that #1 seed, and Dallas have taken a multi-point lead over them as well. One hiccup is all it takes, ladies and gentlemen. This final stage is going to be very telling of how far they can go. The Florida Mayhem. You thrive in the underdog role. I swear, the Mayhem always play their best Overwatch when people stop believing in them. Their qualifiers were pretty mediocre, and most would consider them lucky to have hit the weakest part of their schedule when they did. They practically crawled to this tournament on life support thanks to an easy final week. And yet, when it mattered the most, they popped the hell off. A team that looked so incredibly shaky during their qualifiers ended up one singular map away from a top 3 finish in the tournament. They always clicked when it mattered the most. In spite of all my criticisms about their support line, they got better over time. Majet in particular improved very fast on Lucio and showed us exactly why he is an important part of that team. And don't even get me started with Checkmate. What a fantastic investment by the Florida Mayhem. Between him and all of their other budding stars, Florida are looking like a team you do not want to run into come playoff time. I'll leave it right there. The Washington Justice. Numbers aren't everything. I'm pretty proud of this Justice team. They nearly ended up self-imploding just a couple of weeks ago. But even through all of the drama, the core that has remained has stayed together and they have looked very focused. We got some magnificent Overwatch from them in the face of adversity. They played hard under the leadership of Decay and Assassin and somehow managed to make the tournament. That is one of the most beautiful underdog stories that we have seen in recent memory. 9 times out of 10, a drama of this caliber will usually leave everything destroyed. The Justice are essentially defying the odds. People will laugh at them for getting reverse swept, yada yada yada, it happens again at a tournament, but I give them a pass here. They had no right to even be here to begin with. That alone should leave a lot of Washington fans feeling very proud. And the fact that they're in a fantastic position to make play-ins makes it even better. No matter what ends up happening from here, nobody can question their heart. The Justice are here to stay. The Vancouver Titans. It's never too late to change. Now, in the grand scheme of it, Vancouver's major improvement likely came way too late. There's not enough Overwatch left to play for a miracle run most likely. But even so, they still taught us a valuable lesson. We can all change if given the right situation around us. The Titans were given a new shot at life in this brand new meta that nobody knew how to really play that well, and they took it without hesitation. Those boys popped off while giving us some of the most entertaining matches we have seen all stage. Coach Deepay is doing wonders for this group, and I couldn't be happier for them. Making a tournament after all they've been through is incredible, and it could be the start of things to come. They still have a lot of work to do, but at least there's a glimmer of hope. And I need not remind any of you out there, it's literally been years since the last time they have felt this way. To beat Washington and give the Shock a good fight in the tournament is very awesome. If they can end this year on a high note, maybe they'll end up keeping part of this core and they'll build some sort of team around them for next year. Keep it up, boys. The London Spitfire. Some things never change. Oh, London, London, London. How I wish I could understand you. Every time you're on the cusp of greatness, you run into the Florida Mayhem of all teams. How are they in such a vicious cycle with them? They can literally beat teams that are better, for crying out loud. They can be this hyper-confident villain who puts a damper on the Toronto homestand, but they cannot defeat the Mayhem. I mean, they're literally capable of some great things on paper. A loser's bracket run seemed like a real possibility this time around, especially with the Gladiators and Rain nowhere to be found. That is until they ran into Florida, where they somehow managed to get reverse swept in a tournament setting by them for the second consecutive time. And this one hurts a lot because they honestly looked horrible in the second half of that series. The Spitfire are a very solid competitor, but how can we ever take them 100% seriously when stuff like this always seems to happen? I've been loving the likes of Hottie and Sparker recently, and can really see this team being a decent playoff roster, but they just don't seem to be clutch when they need to be, and that's a major concern. The play-ins are right around the corner, ladies and gentlemen. They're all out of chances to prove themselves. It's now or never. The Toronto Defiant. Cycles are meant to be broken. It took a good 4 years, but the Defiant finally managed to be consistently clutch in a tournament setting. They had the least amount of prize money out of any team in franchise history coming into this event, but they finally came through and broke the curse. I loved what I saw out of this group the entire stage, not just the tournament. This roster finally fulfilled their insane potential. They played with confidence that we have never seen before and showed zero fear in huge moments. Particularly speaking, I believe that although Hisu looked like one of the better DPS lines in this entire meta, I mean, they killed it with some insane Genji and Ashe play. It was a pleasure watching them the entire stage, and I'm truly happy this team finally proved me wrong. A lot of people, including myself, believed that they wouldn't even qualify for their own event, let alone finish third in it. The boys came up huge in do-or-die scenarios against some pretty solid teams, and now they're building a ton of confidence right before the play-ins. If they can ride this momentum, they're gonna be very scary. But that's the thing. Can we expect them to continue this level of play? If they can prove that to us in the Countdown Cup perhaps, then all doubts can officially be erased. But for now, this franchise and their fan base can rest easy. Take the W and be proud of it. The Houston Outlaws. New opportunity? Same you. I want to give the Outlaws a compliment. I mean, like, really badly. There were a few hiccups in their qualifiers and everything, but were still mostly consistent. And the fact that both the Atlanta Reign and the LA Gladiators were not in this tournament had me believing that this team could finally go far. The biggest obstacles in the lower bracket were actually out of their way completely. All the teams left over were very beatable for them. And yet, when the smoke cleared, they literally couldn't get past the second round. Literally, the most perfect opportunity in the world was given to them on a silver platter, and they threw it away. They have no excuse to not get top 4 bare minimum here, but they let the home team walk all over them. It was such a sad way to go out, and I'm very disappointed in them. The more this stuff ends up happening, the less confident you start to feel in them to make any sort of solid playoff push. Do they still have it in them to prove us wrong? I hope so. The San Francisco Shock. Your mental fortitude definitely needs some work still. Okay, so in general, the Shock were pretty nuts. Another second place tournament finish in a 5-1 stage is pretty awesome. And the fact that their support line still looked comfortable in a double main support meta is a fantastic look in terms of their flexibility. However, they still need to work on staying calm when things don't go their way. I know I brought this up in the past, but it's for a different reason now. The focus needs to be on showing good bounce back during the maps themselves rather than during those breaks in between where they need to carry momentum. Both times they played against Dallas, they kind of showed this off perfectly. They absolutely could have won Lijiang on both occasions. They came out of the gate swinging and were looking pretty good with their playmakers, and I mean, they even put the big Dallas players in their place during the first round, but the moment that Dallas adjusted, or somebody like Hanbin, let's say, made a huge play, it all seemed to fall apart, and for whatever reason, it ultimately led to both matches spiraling out of control. It's like their mental got boomed just because they lost a few maps they should have won. They have to work on that. Otherwise, the other top teams in the league are going to beat them every single time without fail. The Shock are worth taking seriously for sure, but without that first place tournament finish under their belts, nobody's going to be considering them the ultimate favorite to win the crown. The Dallas Fuel. You're back on top. It's uncreative, but it's to the point, right? The Fuel looked like last year's team again during this tournament. Something finally ended up clicking. In a meta where being on the same page was absolutely critical, they thrived. They finally found their groove again and were able to control the game the way they wanted to, just like in 2021. Not only that, but Sparkle and Hanbin came in clutch like the good old days. Hanbin in particular was arguably the best Junker Queen in the entire league. He was constantly diffing everybody who came in his way. And with those kind of performances, he's right back in the MVP conversation again. That's now 2 different stages where he absolutely ravaged the league as arguably the best tank player. Dallas were really good, everybody was on the same page, and clearly they had this meta down to a science compared to their opposition. The Fuel have finally regained their lost glory, and they're doing it right when it matters. If they can carry this momentum heading into a new meta, it might be the start of something very special that leads to a title run. This isn't like last year. Getting hot at the end of the season rather than the first half is always a lot scarier. Look out for the Dallas Fuel, boys. I get the feeling they might be back. And that's going to do it for the West. Now for the East. The Hangzhou Spark. Mixed rosters aren't always a good thing. Sure, a lot of other teams found success with mixed teams, but it's still likely, or at least a lot more likely, that you're going to suffer from miscommunication, especially in this type of meta. The Spark happened to be the unlucky franchise to go through it this time. 1-5 with only 6 map wins to their names is a far cry from what we're used to. Try as he might, Shy just couldn't do it on his own. It wasn't possible this time. The team struggled to stay on the same page as they got blown out time after time after time. My hope is that this was just a very poor meta for them, as we've seen what they can do all year long before this stage, so there is some hope that they can bounce back. They need more of the standard again, more instances where they can get away with the individual carries. But I will say, The Spark are definitely in a dangerous place now. Their momentum has been halted significantly, and it very well could destroy their mindset. They gotta weather the storm like right now, or their season could quickly fly off the rails. Good luck, boys. You're gonna need it. The LA Valiant. Some things are out of your control. LA were terrible. Let's not beat around the bush. However, it's really not all their fault when you look behind the scenes. Aside from obvious lineup and synergy struggles, the Valiant were apparently dealing with some major organizational issues. Rumor has it that the org running them have missed multiple salary payments to both the players and the staff. If that wasn't enough, reports have come out saying that players and staff have little to no support regarding things like housing, transportation, and obtaining visas. I'm saying all of this because it likely has an effect on the players and their mindset. I mean, who on earth could play good under so many horrible conditions? It's not fair, and I don't blame the Valiant players in the slightest. Praying things get better soon for these guys, and I hope they stay strong. The Chengdu Hunters. It's not your year. I genuinely am convinced that it's not meant to be for the Chengdu Hunters in 2022. They desperately needed to make this tournament to have any sort of guaranteed playoff spot. This was the final tournament of the entire year. Without those bonus wins, it likely comes down to the play-ins. And so far, this team has failed to come up big in do-or-die situations. They always seem to fall one play short of that goal line. Every time I think that they're going to turn the corner, they choke that must-win game that would have put them over the top. This meta just wasn't what they needed. It was good for the likes of Leaf and Jinmu, but not the rest of the roster. Leaf can only do so much when the meta is all about grouping up and teamwork, you know? The only hope for Chengdu at this point is a drastic meta change that gets them hot at the right time. Because as of right now, they look tired. They need a change, and they need it desperately, or their season is over. The Philadelphia Fusion. MN3 is the key. I mean, yeah. No duh, right? Well, no. Apparently Philly didn't get the memo at first, because for a while they were content with keeping him on the bench in favor of Carpe, and the whole time it really did feel like something was off. But once they brought him back, it's like a light switch went off. Dude was hitting some ridiculous shots with absurd accuracy. That tournament game against the Charge was simply out of this world, and the fact that he could make the likes of Seoul and Shanghai sweat all by himself is evidence of just how valuable he is. Philly may not be a god-tier team, but with MN3 in the lineup, it is always winnable. This dude changes the outcome of a match all by himself. This team has a lot of room to improve, surely, but they're still terrifying for sure. Oh, and shout out to Philly and Zest on their achievements. Philly making all 3 tournaments with a brand new roster, as well as Zest being the first guy in APAC to hit 1,000 final blows is pretty sick. The expectations were not very high for this group this year, but they're doing pretty good. They're holding their own. But obviously, there's still more work to do. Finish the job, Philly. Do it for the fans. The Guangzhou Charge. Sometimes all you need is a little change. What a crazy turnaround for the Charge. They went from struggling to take maps to a 4-win stage and a tournament appearance. And it all starts with the organization not wanting to roll over and die. They could have just thrown in the towel this year after their horrible start. But instead, they addressed the problems head on and brought in some talent that was hungry to win. And look what happened. Jimmy and Xerneas have rejuvenated the entire team. Those boys are looking good out there. Jimmy's comeback story in particular is very awesome, and I'm glad to see him fulfilling his potential alongside Choi Se-wan. In a matter of weeks, this team has gone from dead last in APAC and the clear-cut worst team to above the Valiant and a singular point away from catching the Hunters. It's a long shot, but technically there still might be a chance for them. This is very doable, and they have a lot of momentum. By simply getting rid of the toxic parts and the pieces that didn't work, they have a new chance at life. You love to see it. The Seoul Dynasty. The ship is still sailing. Overall, Seoul did perfectly fine this stage. They had a couple of moments where they nearly fumbled, but still only managed to lose to Shanghai at the end of the day, and considering how good they were, there is literally no shame in that. They were consistent enough to remain relevant, and that's all that truly matters. They made another tournament finals to help make up for their previous shortcomings in the mid-season madness. I was loving the flexibility of Smurf and Prophet, and generally appreciated Stalker's next man up mentality on the Genji, as he had some pretty decent moments on him. They looked really good. I mean, all of their guys contributed. It's worth feeling somewhat confident in them come playoff time, but now it's a matter of finishing strong. Let's see what they do now that Iris is set to make his debut at Flex Support on the team. He's a brand new player to incorporate into a lineup that has been together since day one. Keep an eye out for the Dynasty. I believe that things are about to get very interesting. And lastly is the Shanghai Dragons. And just like the Dallas Fuel, my message is simple. They're back, baby. It took them longer than expected, but they finally managed to adjust. They finally found the confidence and a meta that truly suits them. Teamwork heavy metas like this are just really good for them. They always have been, and they likely always will be. But that's not all. People like Who Are You and Lee Jae Gon were right at home, while the likes of Lip and Void played some insanely good Overwatch on the game's newest heroes. Everybody was popping off in unison just like the good old days, with the exception of Fleta, who was on the bench of course. I mean, it really did feel like I was watching last year's roster all over again, where they often were just winning all of these fights easily, or even in scenarios where they simply were not supposed to win. To put it simply, the Dragons looked unstoppable. 3 maps dropped. The entire stage is a testament to how ahead they really are of their competition. The Dragons are back in form, and are once again showing why they are very much a contender for the crown again. But much like Dallas, we're going to have to wait patiently to see if this continues even after the meta changes. Now, with a team of this caliber, most of us are expecting them to be just fine, especially now that they have finally found success again, since usually the momentum is something that takes them very far, as we've seen last year and even the year before. Both them and the Dallas Fuel, I'd say, are very much alive still. Other teams might have been ahead of the Dragons for a little bit, but if you forget about them, you're going to regret it, and they proved it why this stage. Congrats to the Shanghai Dragons on a job well done. Nobody, and I mean absolutely nobody in the league, deserves the title more. The Kings are back, baby. And you know what else is coming back? The league, starting next week. So stay tuned for the final few months of action, as it should be a lot of fun to see what happens during this final stretch. But until then, that's going to do it for this video. That is one thing that I learned about every team from the Summer Showdown. What are your thoughts about your team after the last month of play? Let me know down in the comments below. And if you enjoyed today's video and want more content just like this, it would mean so much to me if you could hit the like button and subscribe to my channel if you're new. And as always, thank you all so much for watching. I really do appreciate your support. And until next time, this is ATP, signing out. Peace.